This conference will now be recorded.
All right, welcome to our monthly OCP storage project. We have two main topics today. The first is the sustainability white paper for the fifth tenet that John Michael will give us an overview of and bring us all up to speed. And then just talking through a little bit on the OCP Global Summit that's gathering abstracts right now. So with that, I'll hand it over to John Michael.
Thanks, Amber. Let me share my screen here. You guys can see what I'm sharing?
You
No,
can
not yet.
see all of our names and whatnot.
I think you're sharing the wrong screen.
Yeah.
Weird. Share, oh, entire screen. That's odd. It's letting me share this screen. So
I always see a browser.
yeah, I'll just move it over here. That'll work. Okay, you guys can see this now?
Okay,
Yep,
I
we
think
see it
you're in.
now. Yep.
Great. Well, yeah, Amber, thanks again for sending out the copy of the white paper. We are getting close to the IC review and actually being published where we can have it on the OCP contributions page. The idea behind this white paper was, sustainability means something pretty specific to OCP, and we have specific work groups and items that we're tackling. Now that OCP is the fifth tenet, we wanted to make sure that all the other work groups and sub-projects understand what sustainability means and how they can actually tie sustainability to the tenant when they're doing the product submissions or submissions in the IC. So we thought we'd write this white paper to basically describe what does sustainability mean to OCP. I know, sustainability means a lot of different things in different companies. There's ESG. A lot of people confuse, efficiency and sustainability. And so really this was our take to try to kind of explain this. So it's a pretty easy read. Hopefully everybody read it, before, and I'll just kind of go over some of the high level topics. But the first part is really we want to embrace some of the good things that OCP already does, like efficiency and openness, and basically having our opportunity to actually make sustainability standards that we can share. A lot of this is even going on right now in the new carbon modeling work group, for instance, where there's going to be best practices around carbon modeling that can be shared with a bunch of other companies. So there's already a bunch of good stuff that OCP is doing. So sustainability actually makes a lot of sense to do in OCP. The other part is this moving beyond energy efficiency. So I think a lot of people just think sustainability, they think energy efficiency, they think PUE. And again, we even saw this quite a bit, and I'll kind of give some examples at the OCP Global Summit where a lot of people were saying, look how sustainable we are, but actually they were just talking about energy efficiency for their product, which is fine. It's a good thing, but we're trying to help people understand what is the difference and how do you talk about it. And then now, as the fifth tenet, all product submissions have to be sustainable. And so what does that mean? That means you just have to basically describe, we have the guiding principles for how you describe your sustainability tenet. And what we came up with was meaningful, relevant, and data-driven. Kind of dive into what exactly we're looking for. So this was kind of just a high-level overview of, yes, sustainability is a project, but there is a bunch of work going on in sustainability in the other subteams. And ideally, we don't want all the work to be done in the sustainability project. I mean, there are certain subgroups that are happening right now is the data center facilities and carbon modeling work group. In the past, we had the circularity work group. The output of that was the media sanitization white paper, as well as the design for circularity guide. But really, all the products will have their own sustainability sections and their own things that mean something to that specific segment. So in the white paper, we go through kind of three areas. One is just transparency, reporting, and metrics, which we go into kind of two categories. One is just for data center operators, and one is for suppliers. And then we go into circularity, going through the design for circularity guide, categories of circularity, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time on that. But really, defining circularity as materials maintaining their highest value flow possible, prioritizing reuse, getting lots of different use across different lives. You have to. We talked a lot about this in this work group about how that pertains to SSDs and hard drives, specifically on media sanitization, transfer of ownership, and that being a major barrier to circularity. And then interoperability and efficiency, which are kind of those last categories. There are their own things in OCP, but they are tied to sustainability, especially around designing a product for circularity. You may have reusable components, reusable subcomponents, things that are industry standard. Stuff like EDSFF is a great example of this. Yeah, so the first one is for the first chapter part is around the data center operations. This is pretty well understood. Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3, kind of just defining the greenhouse gas reporting standard. And then see if it can pop up. We did have a really good example down here from Alex at Schneider on just some example metrics that you could use if you're a data center operator or a company reporting your Scope 1 and Scope 2 on the different frameworks and standards that you would want to use. But really, it kind of goes down to energy, greenhouse gas emissions, which people call carbon footprint, carbon emissions, Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3. And you have your carbon usage effectiveness, carbon offsets, stuff that falls into that category. And then you have water and waste. So these are really the categories within the data center operators. DJ had this nice slide during the OCP Global Summit this year that basically said for a company like Meta, who was trying to get to net zero at 2030, not just for their own operations, but the entire value chain, it is now flipped because most of their data centers are now using renewable energy. The majority of their Scope 3 comes from embodied carbon from components that they buy from vendors for stuff like CPUs, DRAM, and SSDs. And so this is a pretty important topic for downstream for these for these hyperscalers that have to buy components. And so for these downstream folks that are making devices, really the best way to communicate your sustainability as far as greenhouse gas reporting, water, waste, is through a life cycle assessment. So we go through and give some examples of, there is a OCP white paper on life cycle assessments that was done by Microsoft and some other folks. For hyperscalers, there's some examples in this white paper about ISO 140 and the family of standards around environmental product declarations. I think I've said this before, there are some storage vendors that have some really good LCAs that are publicly posted on the website, and most of the storage vendors have zero publicly facing LCAs that you can find on their website. Yeah, so that's definitely, we have a lot of room to do here. And I'll talk a little bit more about why we want to get some of these people, the storage vendors, into the other work groups like the carbon modeling work group, so we can have some consistent reporting across lifecycle assessments. And so that when these hyperscalers and other customers are trying to properly report their Scope 3, they can have APIs and access to the data from at the NAND level, at the hard drive level, per unit, per terabyte. There's lots of stuff we can do here. But yeah, step one is just getting life cycle assessment, which again is not being done very consistently today. Yeah, then the next section is about product circularity. So there is a lot of sections that we go into in the circularity. So the first is really just defining what the circular economy is, and then going into the areas of the circular economy. We talk a lot about life extension, use extension. I think we favor the term use instead of life. Devices aren't alive, but I know people talk about life and end of life, but we're trying to get more towards use and end of use in the terminology, with reuse being the most important aspect of circularity because it has the highest, maintaining the highest value across the use, across the life cycles. So if you measure this in carbon, reusing the device, so taking a device that would be used for 5 years, for instance, and extending the use period to 7 or 8 years through reuse and media sanitization, that would tremendously decrease the embodied carbon across, if you amortize it per year. So this is the most important aspect of circularity to look at. But there's other things, repairing, refurbish, remanufacture. Actually, in the Design for Circularity guide, I give some good examples of how you can have stuff that can keep devices in use for longer through firmware updates. There's really good stuff like in the OCP NVMe SSD spec, like the C1 log page, for being able to recover from firmware errors, not break a drive after you have a minor firmware fault. These are really important things to keep devices in use for longer. So yeah, go in here. And so there's two really parts of this is just the defining circularity section. You can click on our design for circularity guide, which pops you up this little Google spreadsheet, which is meant for use for the other projects, like the storage project, to go through here and look at their products and go through these categories and say, okay, which of these can I tie to my product and disclose in my specifications, in the sustainability specs that we publish through OCP. There's tons of these categories. And again, if you look through just like the OCP NVMe SSD spec, there are a ton of things in there that could actually be tied to sustainability. Stuff like industry standard form factors. I mentioned firmware recovery and errors, resiliency, security. These are all stuff that has ties to sustainability and circularity. So yeah, so check that out if you are looking to start disclosing your product circularity. There are multiple ways to do that. There are industry standard things like Ellen MacArthur Foundation Material Circularity Indicator, but those are not very well suited for the ICT industry. So, which is why we created the Design for Circularity Guide in OCP, because now we have some very specific circularity things that are tied to ICT components. All right, yeah, then next one is this efficiency and interoperability section. The interoperability, I think everybody knows this pretty well. In this work group, it's pretty easy to understand. You have stuff like EDSFF, data center, DC, MHS, OpenRack, OCP NIC. These are industry standard form factors, connectors. You have PCI Express, NVMe. These are good things. These are industry standard specifications that give you interoperability. What we want to make sure, as far as from the storage side, again, we're going this direction with the OCP storage specs, is having industry standard firmware so that we can, at the end of the first use, sanitize the drive and reuse it and not be tied to some specific firmware version, or at least have a way to flash that back at the manufacturer prior to resale. But yeah, interoperability is really important part of circularity, because if things aren't interoperable, then nobody can use them for a second use. So this is where I saw probably the most confusion at OCP Global Summit, which was, efficiency is one aspect of circularity, of sustainability, but it is not all of sustainability. And, I'll pick on, I'll just say I saw a decent amount of presentations that were guilty of this. I'll pick on Jeff because he had a keynote, and this is the Ampere keynote. But, basically, okay, so this slide saying, server efficiency is fundamental to sustainable growth. Okay, this is not terrible. Cloud native compute is more sustainable. So making a claim like this, one, should never be done against the competition. There are guidelines that prohibit basically doing sustainability claims. And as you'll see, there's a lot of, especially when you're even comparing life cycle assessments, everybody has different boundary conditions, have different methodologies right now. So comparing competitively sustainability is actually very, not only challenging, but you should not be doing it. But saying your product is more sustainable, when a better word is maybe more efficient in something like this, in an example like this. So there are ways to claim, about how sustainable you are, or how the energy efficiency aspects of your product are making your product more sustainable. And you can do that through a life cycle assessment. And if you wanted to say, for instance, okay, we made the product 30% more efficient, and when this customer did a life cycle assessment, it reduced their scope 3 by X number of tons of carbon because the use phase went down by 30%. So that is a way to say that your efficiency had an impact on sustainability. You can't just say, oh, my product's more efficient, so all my products are sustainable, because that's not what that means. And yeah, there is a desire to go beyond PUE. So this is, there are a bunch of metrics. I know Meta has been talking about HUE. In the white paper, we go through actually quite a bit of different sustainability efficiency metrics that are being developed. So there's some stuff coming through EU Climate Neutral Data Pack, TCG Green Grid, EEB, IBAS Climate Accord. There is a ton of work now going on in the carbon modeling work group in the OCP Sustainability Project. We basically be able to, actually have standardized processes for reporting embodied carbon across life cycle assessments to be used across chip manufacturing and factories. But yes, so we do want to, as OCP, embrace a standard that is beyond PUE for devices. We, uh, Again, I think the commitment is that we will do something. There are a bunch of competing standards out there, and the OCP sustainability project will kind of help. Was there a question there? All right. Yeah. So the last this is just kind of pop this in here to talk about the new work streams that are going on in the sustainability project. I mentioned there was a metrics and reporting work stream, and then there was a circularity work stream. Those are not work group meetings aren't happening anymore. There is a monthly sustainability project call. So if you're going to go to any of the sustainability project calls, I think the monthly call is pretty easy one to go to. Again, those are recorded and on the wiki as well, but there are two new work streams for 2023. There's the data center facility and sustainability. Uh, uh, that one is really for all non-IT hardware. So there's stuff going into like the OCP Ready program from Rob. Priya from Google is, I believe, leading this one. But it's really about data center facility power, cooling, architecture, IT space layout, monitoring control, all the stuff that's not the IT components, just for the actual data center itself. And then there's the carbon modeling workstream, and Mohan and Scott are leading that. And they are looking, this one is just getting started. I think there's been a handful of meetings, but the priority they've decided is to look through ICs and packaging and then storage and networking. They do need some help on the storage side. And so I told them there are some vendors that have quite a bit of data on lifecycle assessments for hard drives and are starting to do this analysis for SSDs, at least for the manufacturing carbon from the factories. And so this would be a good time for the storage vendors to engage in this carbon modeling work stream so that there can be some standardized format across, NAND vendors across different fabs to basically be able to report some kind of coherent standards so that when the customer kind of reports upstream for their scope 3, then that don't necessarily have to do it every single product. I know it's very tedious right now because the SSD vendors have tons of different products and they have a ton of different capacity points, and just picking an arbitrary capacity point, some server config, it doesn't give you all the LCA data you really need for all the customers to actually run their full life cycle assessment. So again, looking for help here. So they'll probably need a few volunteers from storage work group. All right, so yeah, summary. So again, the white paper is really just meant for the audience of the white paper is other projects in OCP, like the storage project. Talking about sustainability is much more than energy efficiency. So again, to recap, just transparency, reporting metrics for data center operators, for device vendors and manufacturers, and then going into circularity, interoperability, and then talking about efficiency and how it relates to sustainability. We're here to help. I already told Amber and Ross I'm happy to review any of the OCP storage specs and just say, here's all the things that I think are already in there that are really good for sustainability that you guys should be putting in the sustainability section. And this will be part of the IC reviews for sustainability. Again, this meaningful, relevant, and data-driven, I mean, those are pretty straightforward words, but really the meaningful part is just that, we want to avoid greenwashing. Again, don't pick one thing and say, yeah, our product, we made the product 10% more efficient. So yes, this is a huge sustainable product. So just really the idea is that we want to be reviewing the submissions that there is a meaningful impact. And for the storage project, really that's just, on the NVMe SSD spec, for instance, there's, there are two sustainability line items. One's that you must do an LCA. So I think there's a lot more, as you just heard, that we can put in security, media sanitization, circularity, interoperability that fall into these categories that can be easily applied to the storage spec. So yeah, and again, I'm here to help. Just review the rest of the OCP sustainability project. Is happy to review any of the contributions and help.
Thanks, John Michael. Do people have? Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry. Here's there's a link to the wiki, but you guys should know where to find it. It's fairly easy to find on the page.
Thanks so much, John Michael. Do people have questions? Thanks for driving. It's a huge and important area, and we all have to get our life cycle assessments done, definitely, and more. So let me do, let's see, the next item is just the open, not the open, sorry, the OCP Global Summit. So a couple of things I wanted to just touch on. One is, so are you guys seeing the OCP storage tech talks? Is that
Yes.
sharing? Perfect.
Yep.
So just wanted to highlight that the May event that we had, you can find the video here and on the past events page at OCP, and I'll include this in the notes. And it also has all the PDFs of the different presentations. We've already had 895 views of the talk. So obviously people were finding it interesting. So just great job by the team. So I wanted to call that out. For the OCP Global Summit, that is happening on, if you guys hopefully are seeing my screen refresh to the Global Summit page. So that is occurring in San Jose on October 17th through 19th. So please make sure you mark your calendars and plan to attend. The call for presentations is out. So the breakout sessions for days 2 and 3 of the summit, including the storage track. The deadline to submit is June 16th, which is next Friday. And so please make sure you're working on your abstracts. There's a, if I remember correctly, 1,000 character limit. So make sure that you submit. Swapna, did you have something to add? You're echoing.
I'm echoing. Let me try to figure out what's going on. Give me a minute.
No worries. So, but did you have anything to add, Swapna? Or, oh, I think she.
No, I'm here. I think when I switched from my phone, it added me twice. I don't have
That's
anything
always
to
fun.
add. Sorry,
Okay,
Amber.
no worries at all. So on the so just wanted to highlight for everybody to make sure that you're getting your abstracts ready by end of next week and getting those submitted. There is more time for future technologies symposium if you have something that's not related. I mean, it could be storage related, but if you have a deeper dive into future technology items, there's this symposium that's usually a 2-pager type of item that you submit, and that's due June 30th. And then there's also some technology demonstrations. So please go about getting those together. And the summit theme this year is scaling innovation through collaboration. So they have a bit of material. Cliff Grossner wrote a blog on that. So feel free to take a look at that if you're interested. Any questions on the summit? So we just roll from one to the next. So that's what I had for today. Does anybody else have any opens or any agenda topics for our next monthly call?
I don't know if
All
I
right.
could do it next. I don't know if I could do it next month, but I do know that our team is looking at doing the stuff that we brought forward before about aligning stuff, and I'll have to find out when I can bring that back in. I'm not sure if next month will be good, but maybe the month after I can give a status back.
And Mike, do you mean on that one the tooling for the?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, that'd be great. Anyone else have any opens or future agenda topics?
Yeah, Amber, I just wanted to inquire, we talked some months ago about hyperscaler requirements for sanitization. Any thought when that might be presented?
So I think the key thing is to get alignment on what those requirements would be for example, what SPDM version is a root of trust required, and is that Calyptra or not? And I'm not certain on the timeline for coming to consensus on that. Lee, is that something that you're perceiving as part of the NVMe data center SSD revision 2.5, or is that future
Yeah,
beyond that?
yeah, a lot of that, what you just talked about, is in there. That's, also things around what's it, 2883 and purge requirements and things like that. So
Okay,
So
thanks.
Do you think that we would maybe be able to do that in a month or two in terms of just a deeper dive overview or any thoughts?
Put them together.
Okay,
Mhm.
cool.
Very good. Thank you.
Of course. Anyone else have any opens, questions? Awesome. Well, enjoy your
Great job
evening or your
on,
morning, depending where you're going. So, sorry, say again, John Michael.
yeah, great job on the summit, the Storage Tech Day. That was great.
And
Yeah.
excited about the next one, right? Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just saying it was great. I actually liked the presentations, man. They were on point.
Yeah, it seems like we all are excited about telemetry, so I'm excited to see what telemetry progress we make by October. But, awesome. Well, thanks everybody for your time. Have a wonderful night or morning.
Bye
All
all.
right. Cheers, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.